My name is Claire Whitmore, and I learned the hard way that family doesn't always celebrate your happiness. At my wedding, I handed my father the bill for his own lies, in front of every guest, then walked away before he could speak. You should have seen his face. He finally got a taste of what silence feels like. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? And if you've ever had to earn love that should have been freely given, this story might hit home. Now let me take you back to where it all started. It was a Friday evening in February, the kind of brittle cold only downtown Chicago could conjure, where your breath turned to glass and even cab drivers looked tired. I had picked a sleek little French restaurant tucked on the edge of River North for the occasion. Not too stuffy, but elegant enough to make an announcement feel special. My fiancé, Marcus, had helped me reserve a corner table for 6. I was nervous but hopeful. My parents, Ron and Delia Whitmore, swept into the restaurant in their usual rhythm, my mother leading with crisp, silent judgment in her heels, and my father half-shrugging behind her, already muttering about the parking. Jake, my little brother, trailed them wearing the wrinkled look of someone who was used to playing referee. I stood and hugged each of them. My mother patted my cheek like I was 5, and my father gave me a distracted grunt before sitting down and signaling the waiter for a scotch. Jake gave me a small smile and nudged my arm as if to say good luck. I appreciated the gesture more than I let on. I waited until the entrees had been ordered, roasted duck for me, steak frite for my father, halibut for my mother, and then, as the waiter disappeared and wine was poured, I took a breath. So, I have news. My mother didn't look up from her wine glass. My father tapped at the side of his phone like it was misbehaving. Jake glanced at me, his fork hovering. I'm engaged, I said softly, then louder. Marcus proposed last weekend in Grant Park. I said yes. For a moment I expected applause, maybe a genuine smile, a congratulations, honey, something. Instead, my mother set down her glass with surgical precision and said, we won't be coming. I blinked. What? To the wedding, she clarified, folding her napkin and placing it in her lap like she was hosting a tea ceremony. It's not our thing. My father snorted and muttered, weddings are a waste of money anyway, show-off nonsense. The room seemed to fall away, sound drowned out by the ringing in my ears. I forced myself to stay composed like I'd just misheard, or maybe they were joking in that dry, Whitmore way that only made sense inside our family. But why? You don't even know the date yet. My mother finally looked at me. Claire, you're 32. You've made it very clear you want your independence. Why start pretending now that you want our input? I blinked rapidly. This isn't about input, I just wanted you to be there. I thought maybe we could share it. Jake shifted in his seat. Mom, Dad, come on. But Delia gave him a look that froze his sentence midair. You're marrying some man we've met twice, she continued. That's not a family event, that's a Claire event, you know the difference. My father grunted in agreement and went back to scrolling through his phone. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But mostly, I wanted to get up and leave before I gave them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. Instead, I smiled. A small, careful smile. The kind you give when your world has just cracked and you don't want anyone to see the pieces falling. Well, I said, taking a sip of wine that suddenly tasted like vinegar, thanks for coming tonight. My mother raised a brow. Is that all? I nodded. Yes, that's all. She went back to her halibut. My father didn't say another word. Jake offered me a tiny, apologetic shrug before looking down at his plate, pretending the whole thing wasn't happening. But something inside me had already shifted. If they weren't going to give me their love freely, I'd earn it, then decide whether I even wanted it. That night, I walked home through the frozen streets, engagement ring heavy on my finger, determined. I was going to make them change their minds. I was going to win them back. Even if it cost me more than I could afford. But I had no idea just how much they were willing to take. I sat on the floor of my apartment the next morning, sunlight filtering through the tall windows, spreading gold across the wedding binder I'd barely cracked open. My coffee had gone cold. Pages of venue ideas, color palettes, and catering estimates surrounded me like fragments of someone else's life. Someone with a warm, supportive family. Someone who got a hug after announcing her engagement, not a lecture about wastefulness. But I couldn't let their reaction last night be the final word. Not yet. It wasn't anger I felt, it was this quiet ache. Like I was grieving something that hadn't died yet, just disappeared behind a locked door. I needed a way back in. My fingers grazed over the tab labeled guest list. It was still mostly blank. I hadn't dared write their names yet. but maybe I could buy a second chance. Not with bribery, with experience, memories. When we were kids, our rare family vacations were the only times my parents laughed without guarded eyes. Myrtle Beach when I was 10, Napa when I was 17 and old enough to sip my mom's wine when dad wasn't looking. Back then, money had still been tight. But now I had savings. A good job. A little cushion Marcus and I had built for the wedding. What if? Instead of throwing all of it at a big event they already resented, I invited them somewhere warm and beautiful. Not to talk about the wedding, just to be together, to soften the air between us again. It was a risk, but I was desperate enough to try. I opened my laptop, searching for resorts in Florida. I clicked through images of oceanfront balconies, infinity pools, outdoor brunch buffets, and private beach cabanas. I could already picture my mother in a wide sun hat, my father on a golf cart, Jake with his nose in a book under a beach umbrella. It could work. It had to work. The problem was it wasn't cheap. I ran the numbers 3 times. Flights, hotel suite for 5, rental SUV, spa credits just to make sure my mother didn't feel inconvenienced. I even threw in breakfast delivery for the first morning. It came out to almost everything I'd saved. I stared at the figure, then at the car keys sitting in my entryway bowl. I loved that car, my first big grown-up purchase. A sleek silver hybrid I'd named Leela because it looked elegant and dependable. But suddenly it didn't feel so important. A week later, Leela was gone. Sold to a family of 5 with 2 booster seats and a very chatty golden retriever. I tried not to cry watching them drive away. The deposit hit my account the next morning. By lunchtime, I'd booked the trip. A 5-night stay at a high-end beach resort on Florida's Gulf Coast, just before spring season prices spiked. I arranged everything under my name. No strings, no expectations, just an invitation in the form of a handwritten card. Dear Mom, Dad, Jake, I thought we could use a little sunshine together. My treat. Let's forget everything else for a week. Love, Claire. I slid the envelope into their mailbox that same afternoon. My fingers trembled as I let go of it. Back home, I sat beside the binder again, only now it felt different. Not a symbol of pressure, but hope. Maybe when they saw the waves and white linens and smiling waitstaff, something in them would soften. Maybe they'd look at me and not see a disappointment or an expense, but their daughter. A woman who still wanted to be held close, no matter how far she'd grown. For the first time in weeks, I let myself imagine it. Walking down the aisle and seeing my father in the front row, not on his phone but looking up. My mother blinking back proud tears. Jake nervously straightening his tie. It wasn't impossible. Maybe this was the way in. The resort was everything I'd hoped for, white stone pathways lined with pink bougainvillea, a lobby that smelled like fresh citrus and clean linen, and a stretch of private beach where the Gulf shimmered like poured glass. When I saw my family walk through the lobby doors, fresh off their flight, a flutter of cautious optimism stirred in my chest. My mother, in oversized sunglasses and a soft blue linen blouse, gave a tight-lipped smile. My father immediately asked where the bar was. Jake, sweet Jake, gave me a hug that lingered just a second longer than usual. I still can't believe you booked all this, he whispered. Looks like a honeymoon spot. I laughed, nervous. Well, you guys deserve a break. That first evening, I had a charcuterie board waiting in the suite, figs, brie, those little almond crackers my mom likes. I opened a bottle of chilled rosé and poured everyone a glass. My father was already poking around the minibar, inspecting the liquor selection like a seasoned judge. Claire's going all out, he muttered with half a grin. This scotch isn't bad. 5 stars, I said. Only the best. I didn't say how the scent of that scotch reminded me of my car's leather seats, or how I'd stood in the dealership lot after the sale, palms aching from gripping the keys too hard. Instead, I smiled. I played the host. Over the next few days, I orchestrated everything. Room service breakfasts, croissants, eggs Benedict, pressed juice. Poolside loungers reserved with rolled towels and neatly folded magazines. I booked a private dolphin tour for the group, even though I get seasick and spent half the boat ride pretending I was just enjoying the breeze. Still, it was worth it. I watched my mother laugh, a real, throaty laugh when a seagull stole half her sandwich by the pool. I caught my father humming while flipping through a local real estate magazine, idly saying, you know, the property taxes aren't bad down here. Even more surprising, they weren't constantly on their phones. My mom actually asked me about the engagement, albeit cautiously. So Marcus, she said, lounging under an umbrella with a sun hat tilted over one eye. Is he tall enough? I laughed, caught off guard. He's 6 feet. Why? She sipped her iced tea. You were always drawn to men who leaned. Poet, your high school boyfriend wore eyeliner, remember? God, Evan, I groaned. That was a phase. Mum, she said with a knowing smirk, and for a second we were just two women gossiping, not a mother and daughter papering over years of disappointment. One evening we shared dinner on the resort terrace. The sun dipped low, casting everything in amber. My father raised a glass of scotch and said, I'll give this place credit, feels like we're finally on vacation. And my mother added, even Claire's loosened up. No color-coded schedules this time. I grinned. I left the spreadsheets at home. Jake leaned in, whispering, they like this version of you. I nodded, not sure whether to feel pleased or hollow. Was it the version of me who was calm and generous and never asked for anything back? The version who footed the bill and didn't demand support? I didn't want to think about it, not yet. That night I went back to my suite alone, barefoot and a little sunburned. I stood on the balcony watching the waves roll in like slow breath. I imagined my wedding here, maybe. Small and warm. My mother walking with me on the beach, holding my veil to keep it from catching the wind. My father giving a speech that made everyone cry. I believed it was possible now. For the first time since the restaurant dinner in Chicago, I felt the door crack open. Maybe this was how it began. Not with big apologies or emotional declarations, but with small moments. Laughter, shared drinks, a little warmth on a white sand beach. I slipped into bed with the sliding door open, lulled by the sea. Maybe I'd done the impossible. Maybe they were finally coming around. It was our third night at the resort, and for once, I let myself breathe. After a long dinner, stone-grilled sea bass and a round of key lime pie I insisted on covering, I decided to take a late spa appointment. A 90-minute massage, something I'd never normally splurge on for myself. But I felt like I'd earned it. The progress over these few days had felt real. My mother even took a selfie with me earlier, cheek to cheek, and posted it with a simple caption, "Sunset with my girl." It nearly brought me to tears. I left the spa in a light daze, skin warm and scented with lavender oil, robe exchanged for my flowy dress and sandals. The resort was quiet, just the rhythmic murmur of waves and the distant clink of ice in cocktail glasses somewhere near the pool bar. As I stepped into the corridor leading to our rooms, I heard familiar voices. At first I smiled, about to call out, until I caught the tone. I swear she's doing it all herself, my father's voice said, amused. Room service, boat tour, God knows what she booked for tomorrow, just let her run herself dry. Laughter, my mother's. Honestly, she said, it's almost impressive. You'd think she was trying to buy her way into our good graces. Guess the ring came with delusions of grandeur. I stopped walking. I was just outside a columned alcove leading to the side hall, one of those decorative offshoots lined with tropical plants and oversized ceramic vases. My sandals scraped the tile as I backed into the shadows, breath held tight in my throat. She sold that little car, didn't she? Dad asked. The hybrid. Yes, and Marcus probably has no idea. She's too proud to tell him she used their wedding budget on us. Well, let's make it worth it then, he chuckled. Tomorrow I'll hit the golf concierge and see if we can upgrade to the private course. Should go right to her card. She's already comped the spa again for me, my mother added. I booked another deep tissue for Saturday. I figured, why not? Might as well get something out of all this sentiment. Let her dig her own hole, my father muttered. By the time the wedding happens, if it does, she'll be too broke to make a scene. That's when the tears started. Not loud sobs, just the kind that burn behind your eyelids and slide out on their own. I covered my mouth. I was trembling not from shock but from the precision of the betrayal. The coordination of it, the ease in their voices. This hadn't been a misunderstanding. It was a plan. They knew exactly what I was doing. And they were using it. My own parents. Sitting in a luxury corridor, sipping cocktails on my dime, scheming how to milk every cent from their daughter before she figured it out. My knees went weak, and I leaned against the planter beside me, bracing myself in the shadows. A housekeeping cart creaked in the distance, and their voices faded as they turned down the hall. It was only then that I could breathe again. I stood there for a long time, not thinking, just existing in the sick, sharp silence that follows a betrayal you can't unhear. My mother's voice echoed in my mind, delusions of grandeur. My father's laugh, let her ruin herself. It wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. I wasn't a daughter to them. I was a wallet, a fool in a sundress with a romantic heart and an open credit limit. Eventually, I straightened. My legs moved without my permission. Back to my room, back through the polished hallway that now felt cold and carnivorous. I closed the door quietly behind me. No more sunset brunches, no more hand-delivered menus or spa treatments on my tab. Tomorrow would look different, very different. I didn't cry loudly. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even sit down. I stood in the middle of my suite, shoes still on, purse still over my shoulder, and opened my laptop. The glow of the screen felt colder than the marble floors. I started with the resort app. My fingers were steady, almost detached, as if they belonged to someone else. Cancel spa appointment. Cancel golf upgrade. Cancel private brunch reservation. Each confirmation ping felt like a small exhale. My phone rang. Front desk, this is Alina. How may I assist you this evening? Hi, I said, voice calm, surprising even me. I'd like to review all charges currently authorized to my room. There was a pause, keyboard clicks. Yes, Ms. Whitmore, I see several pending add-ons scheduled for the next 2 days. Please cancel anything not already completed, effective immediately. Of course, and the remaining guests. I hesitated for half a second. Please keep their return flights for tomorrow morning. Same airline. Same seats if possible. Tomorrow? She asked gently. Yes, early. Understood, shall I inform them? No, I said, I'll take care of that. I closed the laptop and leaned against the desk, finally letting the weight settle. My hands shook now, but only a little. I pulled a notepad from my bag, tore out a single sheet. Your flights have been moved to tomorrow morning. Transportation will be waiting at 6 a.m. Everything is covered. Safe travels. Claire, no confrontation. No accusations. No explanations, they'd only twist, just an ending. I walked down the hall quietly and slid the note under the door of their suite. My heart hammered, but no one opened it. No voices, no laughter. Back in my room, the sun was beginning to sink, the sky blushing orange and gold. The view was almost cruel in its beauty. My phone buzzed again, this time with wedding emails. Venue upgrade confirmation. Decorator mock-ups attached. Deposit due tomorrow. I stared at the subject lines, then tapped Select All. Delete. Another message came through from the decorator I'd been working with for weeks. Claire, just checking in, are we still moving forward with the premium arch and imported florals? I'm so excited for you, I typed back slowly. Hi, please pause everything for now, thank you. I set the phone down and finally sat on the edge of the bed. The silence pressed in. A soft knock came at the door. I froze. Another knock, firmer this time. Claire, Jake's voice. It's me. I opened the door just enough to see his worried eyes. Are you okay? He asked quietly. Mom said you weren't feeling well, I swallowed. I'm fine. He looked past me at the darkened room. They're packing. I know. He shifted, hands in his pockets. You didn't have to do this, you know. I met his gaze. Yes, I did. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than he was saying. I'm sorry. Me too, I said. He hesitated, then pulled me into a quick hug before stepping back. Text me when you get home. I will. When the door closed again, I didn't cry, not yet. I stepped out onto the balcony and watched the sun disappear into the water, the sky bleeding into deep purple. Somewhere below, glasses clinked. Laughter floated up from strangers who had no idea what had just ended inside this room. I wrapped my arms around myself and stood there until the last light vanished. This trip was over. So was pretending. The airport was still half asleep when I arrived. It was just past 5 in the morning. A sleepy Florida breeze followed me through the automatic glass doors, rustling the hem of my dress like a quiet question. Are you sure? I didn't answer it. I clutched my boarding pass in one hand, my carry-on in the other, and kept my eyes down as I passed a cheerful family in matching sweatshirts, a couple laughing over shared earbuds, and an older man struggling to repack his toothpaste after security. Everyone, it seemed, had someone. I didn't see my parents at the gate. Good, I didn't want them to know I was leaving early. Didn't want to hear my mother's clipped "Is this really necessary?" or my father's passive shrug. I just wanted out. The boarding call came over the speakers and I moved through the motions in silence, scanning my ticket, walking the jet bridge, nodding to the flight attendant. No one looked at me twice. I took a window seat in the back of the plane, far from the chatter of first class or the tinkling of clinking ice. The seat beside me stayed empty. For a long time, I just stared out the window. The plane took off with a gentle jolt, lifting through layers of gold and gray until the ocean disappeared beneath us. As we leveled into the sky, I pulled the engagement ring from my pocket. I'd taken it off before bed the night before, something I hadn't done since the night Marcus gave it to me, kneeling on a blanket in the middle of Grant Park, hands shaking with more nerves than I'd ever seen on him. It sparkled now in the morning light. So simple, so steady. I curled my fingers around it and closed my eyes. I wasn't crying, not yet. But something inside me was unraveling, slowly, gently like a thread pulled free from an old sweater, not because you meant to destroy it, but because you couldn't hold it together anymore. The flight was only 2 hours, but it felt suspended in some other time, some quiet pocket between heartbreak and healing. Back in Chicago, the sky was gray and heavy like it knew. Marcus picked me up himself. He was parked right at the curb, engine running, coffee waiting in the cup holder. When he saw me, he stepped out of the car and opened the trunk without saying a word. But the moment he closed it and turned to me, I broke. I folded into his arms on the sidewalk, right there in front of the arrivals sign and the lines of cars and people with places to be. I tried, I whispered, voice cracking. I tried so hard to fix it. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. He held me tighter. "It's okay," he said into my hair. "You don't have to say anything yet." Back at our apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed and finally told him everything. The dinner at the French restaurant, the silence, the coldness, the resort idea, the car, the laugh I overheard behind the hallway plant, the note, the early flight, the way my heart kept beating even when it felt like it shouldn't. Marcus didn't interrupt. He didn't flinch. He just listened. When I was finished, he took both my hands, thumb brushing over my skin, grounding me. "We'll get married with or without them," he said softly. "And it will be beautiful." I looked at him then, really looked, and saw no disappointment, no frustration, just love, quiet and unshaken. "But I wanted them there," I said, voice shaking. "Not because I need a big wedding, I wanted them to want to be part of it." "I know," he said. "And it's okay to grieve that. But I promise you, Claire, they don't get to define what this wedding means, or what you deserve." I nodded, tears still slipping down, but the ache began to shift, no longer sharp but dull and deep, like a bruise starting to settle. Marcus reached for the ring on the nightstand and slid it gently back onto my finger. "Still yes?" he asked, a small smile breaking through the sorrow. I laughed through a tear. "Still yes." He pulled me close again, and for the first time in days, I let myself rest. Outside, the sky began to clear. I used to think a wedding needed grandeur to be memorable, floral arches, signature cocktails, a string quartet that played Coldplay covers and cost more than rent. But a month after the resort unraveling, I stood in Marcus's parents' backyard in Milwaukee, surrounded by potted lavender, folding chairs borrowed from the community center, and the hum of early spring. And somehow, it was perfect. We'd scaled everything back. No wedding planner, no tuxedo fittings, no towering cake with hand-painted sugar petals. Instead, Marcus's mom, Evelyn, had spent the past 2 weeks tending to her garden like it was a holy calling. She clipped fresh tulips and hydrangeas that morning, arranging them in mismatched mason jars and wrapping each with twine. "I hope it's not too simple," she said shyly, holding out a bouquet wrapped in parchment paper. I took it from her, touched by the uneven stems and soft scent. "It's beautiful," I whispered, meaning it. She smiled and adjusted my veil with surprisingly steady hands. "You're glowing, sweetheart." Her voice cracked on the last word. I didn't say anything, just leaned in and hugged her. Her embrace was warm, grounding, motherly in a way I hadn't let myself long for until now. The backyard ceremony was small, just 20 guests, mostly Marcus's side. His sister Harper flew in from Oregon with her toddler, who spent the entire exchange of vows chasing a bubble wand through the grass. At one point during the officiant's reading, Marcus's dad, Ron Assar, handed me a tissue without a word, just a gentle nudge and a kind smile. It was that kind of day. Quietly human, full of little grace notes. Our vows weren't dramatic, either. Marcus promised to always listen, especially when I wasn't speaking out loud. I promised to trust love, even when it scared me, even when it had failed me before. There were no dramatic pauses, no music swells, just truth. Afterward, in the small tent Evelyn had set up for lunch, I sat beside Marcus, our fingers tangled on the tabletop, watching his father raise a glass for the toast. "I was going to write something down," Ron Assar began, "but I decided to speak from the heart, the way my son does. a soft murmur of laughter. He looked right at me. Claire, you didn't just marry into this family today. You built this family by how you've shown up, how you love, how you trust. You've reminded all of us what grace looks like. My throat closed. I blinked back tears as he continued, but I don't remember the words, just the warmth of them, the gentleness, the deliberate choice to see me. When the applause ended, Evelyn leaned in and whispered, "You belong here." That's when the tears came, uninvited but welcome. Not because I missed what I never had, but because I realized something. Family doesn't always arrive through blood. Sometimes it finds you in quiet backyards, under string lights, with wildflowers in old jars and kind people who never asked you to prove your worth. After everyone had eaten, Harper handed me a small framed photo she'd taken with her instant camera. Marcus and me laughing mid-vow, wind in my hair, his face tilted toward mine like he couldn't believe he'd gotten so lucky. "I think this one's the real keepsake," she said, grinning. I slipped it into my bag, pressing the glass like it might disappear. Later that evening, after the guests had left and the tent had been folded away, I sat barefoot on the porch with Marcus, 2 mugs of leftover coffee between us. "You okay?" he asked, watching me in the fading light. I nodded. "Better than okay." He took my hand and kissed the back of it. "No regrets," I smiled. "Only that I didn't do this sooner." It had been 14 days. 14 days since I said I do beneath string lights and spring air. 14 days of peace, warm coffee mornings, and thank you notes written slowly by hand. So when the intercom buzzed on a quiet Saturday morning, I answered it without thinking. "Claire Whitmore, it's your mother. Open the door." The words struck me like a slap. I hadn't spoken to her since Florida. I hadn't even told her we were married. And she wasn't alone. Through the peephole, I saw my father's slouched posture, arms crossed. Behind him, Jake, looking pale and out of place, hands stuffed into the pockets of his hoodie. I opened the door just enough to see my mother's eyes, already scanning the condo behind me like she was measuring it for judgment. "Well," she said, stepping forward uninvited, "this is how you thank us." "Delia," my father said, low and clipped. "Let her speak." But she was already moving, her heels echoing across the hardwood. Jake followed silently, gaze on the floor. Marcus stepped into the hallway, towel still slung over his shoulder from the gym. His eyes met mine and immediately hardened. "Everything okay here?" he asked calmly. "No," my mother snapped. "Everything is not okay." She pulled something from her bag, a printed photo, one I hadn't seen before. Harper must have posted it online. It was from the wedding. Me and Marcus mid-laugh, sun catching my veil, his arms wrapped around me. Delia threw the photo to the floor like it had burned her fingers. "You excluded us," she hissed. "From your own wedding." I stood frozen. My father finally stepped forward. "You humiliated us. Booking our flights out early like we were an afterthought. Do you know what that looked like to the hotel staff? We had to explain why we left before the week was over. Do you think that didn't follow us around the breakfast buffet?" I blinked. "You're upset because the hotel staff might have judged you." "We were guests," he said. "And you treated us like criminals. We want reimbursement for the unused nights." That's when Marcus moved beside me. "You think you deserve a refund for not finishing a vacation you tried to use to bankrupt her?" Delia's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me, she heard you," he said flatly. The hallway conversation, every word, a beat of silence. My mother's cheeks flushed red. "That's ridiculous." Jake shifted beside the kitchen counter. "It's not." She heard everything. Her head snapped toward him. "What?" Jake cleared his throat. "I was coming back from the ice machine that night. I saw her, hiding by that giant plant. I didn't know what to say." Delia's voice dropped. "So you just let her believe that we—" "No," Jake interrupted. "You did say it, I heard it too." My father looked at him like he was a stranger. But Jake wouldn't look at him. "I didn't say anything because I didn't know what the truth would do," he muttered. "Now I do." The room pulsed with heat. The air, too full of old wounds and sour entitlement, felt like it might crack. "I didn't exclude you," I said quietly. "You excluded yourselves the second you made a joke out of my love and generosity." My mother's voice shook. "We raised you, we gave you everything, this is how you repay us." "You didn't raise me to love halfway," I said, "but you showed me what that looked like." Delia's breath hitched, her eyes glossing with something between rage and humiliation. I didn't flinch, neither did Marcus. Neither did Jake. The silence that followed was the kind that shakes foundations. The air in our condo had become something unbreathable, thick with all the things we'd never said, heavy with guilt that didn't belong to me anymore. Then Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself gently but firmly between me and my parents. "Let's stop pretending," he said, voice calm, even. "We asked. You said no. Then you tried to destroy her." My mother laughed, sharp, bitter. "Destroy her? We declined a wedding invitation. That's not sabotage, it's called boundaries." Marcus didn't move. "No, declining would have been saying no and moving on. What you did was accept a vacation, enjoy it, then plot behind her back how to spend her dry. You wanted her broke before she ever walked down the aisle." My father opened his mouth, but before he could respond, the elevator dinged. I turned. Evelyn and Ron, Marcus's parents, stepped into the apartment, carrying a bag of leftovers from the bakery down the street. They paused at the sight of us, all frozen like a courtroom drama in mid-verdict. Evelyn blinked. "Did we interrupt something?" "No," I said quickly. "Yes, but it's okay." Ron looked from my pale face to Marcus's stance, then to the photo still lying face down on the hardwood. He stepped inside slowly. "Actually," Evelyn said, setting the bag down on the counter, "I think it's time we say a few things." My mother scoffed. "Oh, how lovely. The in-laws are here to deliver a sermon." But Evelyn's voice was unshaken. "You don't know me. I didn't grow up like you did. But I do know what it looks like when a daughter bends over backward for love and gets punished for it." My mother's jaw twitched. "You think we don't love her?" "I think you only love her when she makes herself small enough to fit your comfort," Evelyn said gently. "Claire paid for your vacation. She tried to make peace, and you used that kindness to drain her. I watched her cancel her florist with shaking hands. I watched her delete the venue emails. You weren't there. You didn't see how hard she cried." My parents said nothing. Ron stepped forward. "If you want to talk about respect, let's talk about how Claire still offered to pay for your flights home after hearing what you said in that hallway. That's not weakness. That's grace. And you took it like a refund you were owed." They didn't argue. They didn't have to. Every word landed like a weight dropped carefully into place. I hadn't expected Evelyn and Ron to speak up like this, but something in me swelled, this quiet, rising strength I didn't know I had been building. Then Jake, still by the window, spoke. "They plan to bankrupt her," he said simply. "I heard them laughing about it." The room stilled again. My father turned slowly to face him. Jake held up a hand. "Don't, you said it, you laughed. You listed off extra charges like it was a game. I didn't stop it, and I'm sorry, Claire, but don't stand here and pretend you didn't mean it." For a moment, no one moved. Even the refrigerator hum seemed to pause. My mother's gaze flicked from Jake to me to Evelyn to Marcus. And I saw it, just for a second, her composure crack. Not out of guilt, but fear. She was losing control of the story, and I wasn't going to let her rewrite it. I had always pictured this moment differently if I pictured it at all. I thought maybe it would be softer. That I'd gently draw boundaries and they'd nod, tearful, apologetic, finally realizing the weight of their actions. But life isn't a movie. And parents don't always change when the script begs them to. My hands were trembling, but my voice wasn't. "You are no longer welcome here," I said, standing straight, chin lifted even though my knees ached with emotion. "Not until you acknowledge what you did, not until you apologize and mean it." My mother looked at me like I had just spoken in another language. My father's face darkened immediately. "Excuse me." I didn't answer, not a second time. "You're kicking us out," said, stepping forward like his presence alone should make me shrink. "You think you can just erase us because we didn't throw rose petals at your little backyard circus." Marcus moved closer, but I held up a hand. I wanted this moment to be mine. "You weren't excluded because you had opinions," I said quietly. "You were excluded because you weaponized my love. You tried to punish me for growing up. And when you didn't succeed, you came here today to rewrite the story like you were the victims." I turned toward my mother. "You told me you raised me, but all you taught me was how to walk on eggshells, how to earn affection instead of expect it." Her jaw clenched. "I gave you everything." "No," I said, "you gave me conditions." Jake was still in the corner, frozen, half a child, half a man, finally realizing the house of cards he was born into. My father scoffed and looked to him. "So you're just going to let her do this?" Jake didn't move. He didn't have to. "I won't argue with you," I said, my heart thudding like a drum inside my chest. "This isn't a debate, it's a boundary." My mother took a step forward. "Claire, no," I cut in, voice firmer now. "You had every chance to be part of this life with me, but you chose control, and now I choose peace." Evelyn came to my side without a word, her presence like a steady hand on my back. My father looked around the room, searching for backup, finding none. "You're making a mistake," he said coldly. "No," I replied. "I made that mistake in Florida. This is the correction." For a moment he stared at me like he still couldn't believe the version of me that now stood in front of him, and then I turned toward the door. They followed. I opened it calmly. The hallway outside was quiet. Still, my parents stepped through without another word. Jake lingered, his eyes glossy, but he didn't say goodbye. As my mother turned to say something, I don't know what, I closed the door. Firm. Final. The soft thud of wood against frame echoed louder than any scream I'd ever swallowed. It was the sound of something ending. But more importantly, it was the sound of something beginning. 2 weeks passed. It was enough time for the silence to settle. Enough time for me to breathe in this new version of life, lighter but oddly unfamiliar, like moving into a quiet house after years of alarms going off at random. Then the envelope came. No return address, but I recognized the font on the sticker label. My mother always did love her printer presets. Inside was a letter, cream paper, neatly typed, so formal it could have been a corporate memo. "Claire, we understand you felt hurt by recent misunderstandings. This was never our intent. While we may have said things in poor taste, it was never meant to cause harm. We hope in time you'll remember we are your family and that our bond is stronger than momentary disagreements. We look forward to moving past this. Delia and Robert Whitmore, no apology. No ownership, just polished avoidance wrapped in serif font and a signature scanned in digitally." I stared at it in silence, heart flat. Then something in me snapped, not in fury but in certainty. I walked over to the desk, grabbed a red pen and laid the letter flat. Line by line, I edited it. "Misunderstandings" became "calculated betrayals we have yet to own." "Never our intent" became "we hoped you'd be too hurt to fight back." "Momentary disagreements" became "a sustained pattern of manipulation and cruelty." Then, under the signature, I wrote in block letters, "Apology not accepted until you face the truth." I folded it neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and mailed it to their home. No note, no warning, just the facts marked in red. A week later, Marcus posted a few wedding photos on his public account. Not for attention, just gratitude. A digital scrapbook to honor the day that could have broken us but didn't. He chose one of us under the birch tree. Light dappled on my dress, Marcus kissing my forehead as Evelyn and Ron clapped in the background. His caption was short, "To the family that showed up, thank you. You made it beautiful. Chosen family, our real beginning." We didn't tag anyone, didn't name names, but we didn't have to. Within a few hours, the post had dozens of comments. Then hundreds. Then shares. Strangers messaged me, women I'd never met, telling me they saw themselves in my story. The ones who'd walked away from toxic mothers. The ones who planned weddings without a single blood relative and still found joy. I didn't respond to most of them, but I read every word. One woman wrote, "I thought I was weak for letting go, but maybe strength looks exactly like this." Another said, "You didn't just close a door, you opened one for the rest of us." I cried reading that one. Not because I needed validation, but because it reminded me my story didn't end in silence. It ended with truth, with a door closed, and a voice raised. Not in rage, but in clarity. For the first time in my life, I wasn't editing myself to survive. I was editing them in red ink on my terms. And that was the real beginning. It came on a Tuesday. The kind of quiet, ordinary day where nothing big was supposed to happen. Laundry tumbling in the dryer, leftover pasta warming on the stove, Marcus humming to himself in the next room while tinkering with a cabinet hinge that had come loose. Then my email pinged. Subject, "Just wanted to say something." From Jake Whitmore. I stared at the screen for a long moment, the steam from my mug curling in front of the words. Then I opened it. "Hey Claire, I don't really know how to start this except to say I'm sorry. For Florida, for not saying anything sooner, for standing there like a coward when you were being torn apart by the two people who should have protected you first. I moved out 2 weeks ago. I've been crashing at a friend's place and seeing a therapist. I've realized how much of our life growing up wasn't normal. I used to think you were dramatic, but now I get it. You weren't. I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. I just want you to know I see it now. I see you. And I hope one day we can rebuild something honest. Love, Jake." I sat with it for a long time. The last time Jake had really looked me in the eye was in that condo hallway moments before everything cracked open. He had looked torn then, like a boy being asked to pick between his mother's disappointment and his sister's pain. But now he was choosing himself. And that gave me hope. I typed back, Jake, thank you for writing. Thank you for stepping out of that house and toward your own truth. That alone takes more strength than most people ever muster. I'm glad you're talking to someone. That matters more than any apology. I won't lie, there's still a lot of pain here, but the door isn't locked. When you're ready, I'd like to hear more. I'd like to believe that we can find something better than what we came from. Warmly, Claire, I hit send and felt a strange peace settle over me. Not closure, but a soft click of healing starting to form. Not from the people I once begged it from, but from the one who had been stuck inside that house as long as I had, just in a different room. That weekend, we invited Evelyn and Ron over for dinner. Marcus insisted on grilling, his idea of showing love with seared salmon and corn on the cob that never quite caramelized the way he wanted. I baked lemon bars with too much zest, and Evelyn brought a bottle of her favorite red wine, calling it a celebration of the ordinary. We sat on the balcony, laughing under string lights Marcus had put up himself, not for a party, but because I said I liked the way they made evenings feel softer. I know we're not your parents, Evelyn said at one point, squeezing my hand across the table, but if it counts, we are so proud of you. I smiled, the kind that went deeper than my cheeks. It counts. Ron raised his glass. To Claire and to the kind of love that doesn't keep score. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, the warmth I felt wasn't borrowed or begged for. It was mine. The church smelled like warm wood polish and Easter lilies. I had never thought much about baptisms. I didn't grow up going to church on Sundays, unless you count the one time we went with my aunt and my mother spent the car ride home critiquing the pastor's voice like she was a theater critic. But this church, it felt different. It was quiet, not grand. There were no marble columns or golden ceilings, just soft wooden pews, gentle light pouring through old stained glass, and a pastor who spoke like a friend, not a judge. The kind of place you didn't need to dress up your heart to be seen. Marcus stood beside me, rocking Lily gently in his arms. She was swaddled in ivory lace, a tiny silk ribbon tied around her wrist. Her eyes were closed, mouth parted in the beginnings of a sleepy dream. I watched her chest rise and fall, impossibly small, impossibly perfect. She looks like you, Evelyn whispered, beaming from the next pew over. She has Marcus's ears, I whispered back with a grin. Ron chuckled under his breath, one hand resting protectively on his wife's shoulder. Jake sat in the front row, his tie slightly askew, eyes damp. He hadn't said much since he arrived, but I saw it all in his face. The apology still living there, the quiet pride, the longing to be better than what we came from. He'd been coming to dinner once a month now, still in therapy, still learning how to speak without flinching. We never talked about them unless he brought it up first, and even then it was brief. But he never once asked why they weren't invited. He already knew. The pastor stepped forward, voice gentle. Claire and Marcus, she said, do you promise to raise Lily in love, in truth, and in the safety of family by blood or by bond? Marcus looked at me. I nodded, eyes stinging. We do, we said in unison. As she sprinkled the water over Lily's forehead, the baby stirred slightly, then sighed back into sleep. The room felt so still I could hear my own heartbeat. Outside, sunlight streamed in through the stained glass in fractured colors, roses and golds, blues that danced across Lily's blanket and spilled onto my hands. And that's when I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't need them here to prove a point. Their absence wasn't a wound today, it was a decision. A boundary upheld not out of spite, but out of love for the little girl I now held. I had spent years chasing dignity like it was something owed. Something that could only be handed down by the people who named me. But standing there, my daughter baptized, my husband steady at my side, my in-laws beaming like angels in cardigans, I understood. Dignity isn't inherited, it's reclaimed. It's every no that cost you something. Every truth you finally said out loud. Every door you closed, knowing it would never be opened from the other side again. After the service, we stepped outside into the chill of early spring. Someone had left baskets of flower petals for guests to toss, and Evelyn scooped up a handful with delight. Come on, she said, just like your wedding. I laughed and held Lily close as petals fluttered through the air, brushing past her cheeks like tiny, blooming blessings. Jake took a photo of us, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't worry about how I looked in it. I just smiled.